get started. All right, people, on the ready line. Are you me? Yeah! Are you me? Yeah! What are you? What are you?
Hello and welcome to Oscar Mike Radio, this special broadcast as we get ready to count down to 500. Oscar Mike Radio is part of the Hubuzoo Network. You can find out more on hubuzoo.com, and we are also part of the Sinister One Productions family. I want to thank my sponsor, Joyce Asack of Asack Real Estate, and my supporters, Case on Shaving Company, Exceptional Parent Magazine, and Fight Camp. Be your strongest combination. Ladies and gentlemen, I think I got a first here, and I'm excited about this because, I love stories. I love good stories, and this story is still being told 250 years later. I'm pleased to welcome Heather Shreve, writer, speaker, works in the film industry, is an artist, Oscar Mike Radio. Heather, thank you for joining us today.
Oh, thank you, Travis. It's a pleasure to be here.
So we started talking, and I realized the world's a small place. Your last name is Shreve, and I'm like, wait a minute. Is she somehow related to the Shreve of Shreveport, Louisiana, where I joined the Marine Corps out of and lived for several years? And we found that you are, and that is fantastic. But then the reason for the first is your family encompasses 250 years of service to our country. And Heather,
Yes.
I don't believe I've ever talked to anyone who can make that claim and not only make the
Wow.
claim, but back it up. So there's a lot of good stuff to talk with, but I want to start
Yeah,
with the person first.
sure.
What is your work about in the film industry, writing, artist? How did that come together?
Well, the short answer is I was an artist for 25 years, and then I lost my business in the crash of '08, the housing crash. So I had to start all over again, got divorced, became a wellness coach, also a personal trainer just to bridge the gap. But while I was doing that, I was writing the whole time. So my first memoir, well, my only memoir of Africa came out in 2013. I was jailed in East Africa in 1983. So that was Caught on the Equator. And then I had to do a lot of odd things to get things, to cross the bridge, as it were, to get to a writing career where I could make somewhat of a living, which I did by 2015. And then I worked for a short time for McCormick, working on their theory of operation, doing writing and drawing. But the turning point was in 2014. I had my grandfather's transcriptions done by the War Department of his diaries that he hid in Cabanatuan while he was a POW of the Japanese. And I had set them aside because, well, I was a little bit busy with two kids and everything. And I brought them out, and I was thinking it was going to be some kind of sad, sad story. But in truth, it was the most triumphant story I'd ever heard. And so I immediately put it into a book in 2014, The Colonel's Way. And then, of course, I had to do a movie. I had to write the movie. And then it just started to snowball. And now coming out this June with my eighth book. But, to me, everyone needs this IV drip of inspiration. And the stories that I write about are all real. And I believe that they bring to the table, there's nothing better than the truth.
Well, that's the thing. I'm digging into your work and how you've done it, and it's all based on real people who really served our
Mhm.
country and
Mhm.
facing insurmountable challenges. And your father served, if I understand it correctly. Yes.
Well, he was a captain during the Korean War, but I was not born yet, so I'm not a Blue Star kid per se. It was my grandfather that served in three wars that is the amazing hero that I write about all the time and speak about, and keep his story alive, because that was his career, lasted from 1917 to 1961. I
So
know, it's crazy.
So take me back just a little bit. Now, I
Sure.
know what a Gold Star family member is. I know some of the other
Yes.
stars, but Blue Star is not something that we hear very often.
Oh,
What
okay.
is a Blue Star family member?
So a Blue Star family is someone who has an active duty service member and or in a war at at the same time. Gold Star is when you've lost someone to a war or active duty. Blue Star is just active duty.
Well, it's interesting because, we're talking about The Long Blue Shadow. That's the book I believe is coming out soon, and
Mhm.
I've got it on Kindle right now.
Oh, good.
And well, yeah, yeah, I gotta be. I was very interested in the whole, ecosystem you're creating here.
Hmm.
But you talk about it more from, your grandfather's, wife's perspective as a Blue Star family member. And
Hmm.
I'm kind of curious why you chose that as a starting point for, your series.
Well, that's a two-pronged thing. You're right, because the Long Blue Shadow and the subsequent books that follow really delve into the mill spouse aspect and what they have gone through and in the background, but yet in the shadows are still serving and leave an equally indelible mark. I mean, we don't hear about them very much, but the quiet strength that they bring to the table is invaluable. So the Long Blue Shadow is a dual, you see the active duty member, that's my grandfather, but then you really get to see what's going on in the background with my grandmother and the interior conflicts and paradoxes and everything that goes along with Blue Star families. And it really hasn't changed that much today.
Well, to your point, I thought about it when I was serving the Marine Corps. I never really thought about what happens when, you know, I didn't deploy, but a lot of the units around us did in out of Yuma overseas. And I never really thought about what's going on with these, Marines' wives and significant others as they hold down the fort. And it's a dangerous job. And oh yeah, we could be at any time activated to put our lives in danger. What's that all look like? It's not really talked about. I mean, even when I was serving, it was like, okay, that car has a blue flag on, I better salute it, or at least give deference if if the car
Yeah.
has a gunny sticker on it, right? I never thought about it, and then as I got into your story, I thought about it more, and I'm like, we really do not hear about this experience. And as you've gone through writing about this, especially from your own family's perspective,
Yeah.
what are some things that came to mind as you started delving into your grandfather's and your grandmother's story?
Well, the big one is that I realized that when my grandfather was interned for 4 years and my grandmother really didn't know day to day whether he was alive or dead. There was some communication. That's kind of a long story in itself. But the effect that it had on my father and his brother were so profound that what I realize is this legacy of service and or what goes along with it crosses generations, because my father was permanently affected by the fact that he was 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 with no father. And he came out of that in a way, I think, overcompensating, being overly optimistic in life, always using that as a marker that, if I don't, if there's not a war going on, we're good. But I think that for my grandmother, I mean, I just honestly, I've written about it so much. The movie delves into it deeply because we see her too. Long Blue Shadow, the retired book, Once a Colonel, which is now depublished. But I've had to get into their heads, and luckily, I have a lot of real data to go on. But I also have her diaries from 1923 to 1926. But during that time when he's missing in action, basically, or dead, she in real life, and I don't couch it, she went and delved into alcohol seriously and became an alcoholic. Because think about the uncertainty. I mean, back then there was no cell phones, there was no way to communicate. I mean, literally, she was operating on her own with these two boys. And I mean, with the news that was coming out of Cabanatuan, which I don't know if your audience knows about the death march and everything, but out of the original 12,000 POWs, only 350 men made it home. And my
Yeah.
grandfather was one of them. So she, looking at the papers and everything, you would think, well, this is looking pretty grim, so I just can't even imagine that amount of constant uncertainty. It's just horrendous.
Constant uncertainty knows was how were the support systems back then? Because it'd be very
Terrible.
different. Terrible, really.
I think it, no, I think it, I mean, now I can tell you that family lore, we have a lot of stories. I've never heard anybody say, oh, well, my grandmother did XYZ and she had this and that and the other. I don't, she lived on a farm partially, and, and it's in the books, Our Decision, which is out in Howard County. Back then it was just super isolated. And I just can't, except for the women that she knew locally. And she did join the Red Cross. That's true, to drive an ambulance. So there was some connection there. But as far as actual groups of mill spouses getting together and chatting about the situation, I can't, I don't think there was.
I just think back to the numbers you just quoted and I remember it now from my history. Can you imagine now if 12,000 of our troops went out and this was done to them and only 350 came home, what would be the reaction? I mean,
I know, trust me.
we can't even fathom what that was like, and it didn't get a lot of attention. It's in history for certain, but didn't get a lot of attention. So this your grandmother is trying to hold the family together, raise two sons, and
Hmm.
every day she's facing the fact that her husband, your grandfather, may not come home.
Never. Yeah.
And you had to get inside her mind to bring that out.
Yes.
What was happening to you, Heather, as you're getting to know your grandmother in this very unique way?
you know, I completely related to the poor woman. I mean, I knew her later in life, and by the time when I say met her, I knew her. But when as an adult, when I met her, alcohol had taken her prefrontal cortex completely. Her her sense of humor and everything was gone. So
Wow.
I didn't get any stories from her. But to your question, I mean, just getting through the day back then, and doing all the things you had to do, it was a lot less technology and whatnot back then. You had to do things the hard way. I mean, I completely understand if you've got anxiety and this is where you're headed because her brother died of the same thing, alcoholism. Um, I'm sure it was. I'm sure every day was murder, and I could totally feel that. I mean, I could put myself in her shoes. I could see where if you didn't have Arthur's state of mind, which I inherited his state of mind and my father's, I don't have any anxiety or anything like that. But if you didn't have a strong constitution, I mean, I could totally see people slipping off the reservation.
We talk about constitution and resilience during
Mm-hmm.
this time. I'm curious, as you read her diaries, just because it was handwritten back then, right? These weren't
Well,
typed.
these were before she met Arthur, but yes. So I only have her diaries in the early years, but I have his diaries during those 4 years. So I can tell you categorically that he never slipped into any kind of pity ever.
Really?
He was on American command under Wainwright, and he did these diaries because he was determined to make sure that every single Geneva Convention violation was recorded that the Japanese did against them, and that for posterity and history, he was going to go down doing everything by the book, and he made sure that everything was recorded, and that's why he hid them. But I can tell you that his writing, first of all, he was a good writer. He was a good writer. And there was no, it was extremely well written, but again, there was no even hint of pity, except missing his boys and his wife.
Wow.
Yeah.
Just from a structural standpoint, you say he was a good writer, but for your grandmother and grandfather, did you notice that the penmanship or length of the entries change at all over time? Because this isn't like sending a couple of emails. This is years of work you have, if I understand you correctly.
Right. Right. So I really don't, my grandmother, unfortunately, my, I don't know how that got lost, but my grandmother's writing, as far as her letters to Arthur, are gone. I have Arthur's, some of Arthur's. He had beautiful Spencerian handwriting, and he used that in the diaries, and he also used that in little letters that I do have. As far as his consistency in the diaries, 100% good across the board. He never lapsed.
Wow.
I don't know how my grandmother was writing or what she was writing per se. I only have her diaries from 23 to 26, but I can tell you in those diaries, her father died when she was 4 in China. He was a missionary from cholera. So she had this unhealthy, I would say, omission for men and love in general. And there was some entries where she just merely said at the end, I just want to be loved. So in a way, when Arthur left, it fulfilled her deepest fear, which is abandonment. And that's why I think she went so deeply off the cliff, because she was abandoned by death as a child. And then now her husband's gone and she's back to square one.
So that leads me to ask then,
Yeah.
she thought her husband, your grandfather, was gone. What happened then when he came back?
Well, so the first year was very dicey. She didn't really know whether he was alive or dead. But then Red Cross got in. He started getting letters out through the underground, which is the big underlying story in this, is that as a guy on American command, he was of the top 6 it commanded 20. He was 3 in charge. He was offered a secret intel operation by the U.S. government called Home Fires, and the Filipino resistance helped him with this. So he was able to get notes out back to Julia. He got his Howard County checkbook back through the underground into Cabanatuan and started writing checks for his men for the next 4 years. So after that happened, he was able to contact Julia, and she did know he was alive. But, day to day, she didn't know because things happen.
But he came home, right? When he
He
came
did.
home,
Oh, yeah.
right. But when he came home,
Yeah.
that had to be like she
Oh,
thought he was gone. She's getting these letters, and now he's actually in front of
yeah.
her.
Yeah.
That had to be a
So,
monumental change too, right?
well, the story is even better than that because uh and I can't get into too much detail because it's too long, but Bill Shreve, his brother, went to the South Pacific so they could be in contact with each other. And Arthur built a radio crystal receiver in the bottom of his army canteen so they could be in contact. Anyway, so Arthur was rescued after the 3 hell ships. He went to Fukuoka in Japan, and then he was rescued from Jinsen, Korea. But Bill knew the day he was rescued, so Julia knew when he was getting on that ship from Korea to San Francisco. When he got to San Francisco, he wrote her a note, a simple note, and sent her flowers. And it was from the boy whose only joy is loving you, a song, a line from their favorite song. And they decided to meet in the middle at their favorite hotel, which is the Palmer House in Chicago. And that's what they did.
Going through this and bringing this alive, do you think that, in this modern age with cell phones, fiber optic internet that just movies in seconds,
Yeah.
at the core, do you think that we humans are really any different than now than these people were back in 100 years ago?
Absolutely not. I mean, as a human behavior specialist, I would tell you absolutely not. And the only difference is we have a way to moderate the uncertainty today. That's it. We have ways to moderate the uncertainty, but the emotions and everything else is exactly the same.
Huh. Think about it like that. You've written a whole lot. This isn't your first book. What's going on as you're starting to get this out? And I did get on your website and saw that
Uh-huh.
Senator John McCain, God rest his soul,
Yes.
read about this story and commented
Yes. Yes.
very heartwarming comment about what he read. What's it like seeing that feedback come back from this part of our history?
You know, it's interesting. There was a lot of excellent men back then when my grandfather served, during World War II. And when he came back, many people said, even though he received 11 medals or whatever, that he didn't really get his just desserts, which was the Medal of Honor. So in a way, I feel like bringing the story to the fore now is just a way to to make sure that what he did was recognized in a way that not only can help and inspire people, but just keep his memory alive. Because as we get farther and farther away from World War II, these stories are disappearing. Both my parents lived through the war. So I have firsthand knowledge of the war.
You do this, and it's 250 years of total service to our country. But I am curious,
Yeah.
why start with, World War One in this arc versus
Hmm.
going back to the Revolutionary or Civil War?
Oh,
I'm
well.
curious.
Well, the Long Blue Shadow is really just about my grandparents. So it makes sense
Okay.
in story design. You always want to hit the first page with an inciting incident, just like in a movie. You want to get the audience, his inciting incident is, and this is true, when he came back from being a pilot over France, he took a small break. He worked for the Whiting Turner Company. And then in 1920, he had to make a decision. Was he going to go re-enlist or not? And so the inciting incident is he's re-enlisting. So that's why I'm starting with that. It's basically his misbelief that he has to serve large, which changes over time, and also just it's conflict. Stay with the family or serve in a bigger way.
As you start with book one of the Long Blue Shadow,
Mm-hmm.
what do you want readers like me to take from it? Is this simply, and not simply is not the right word, but you know what I'm saying here, simply
Yeah.
a story about a part of your family, or is there a deeper meaning you're trying to let people, specifically Americans, know about?
Oh, I always write with deeper wisdom. So
Okay.
it's there's we have one of the other things about story is simple plot, complex characters. So I always hope that, of course, you see yourself in these characters somewhere, right? Because you might have lived a life like, moving from pillar to post. You might have seen that. Honestly, there's a lot of embedded wisdom just about history itself, repeating itself. We don't realize what's going on in the moment until we have 2020 hindsight. There's a lot of that going on. But again, the deeper conflict and the deeper, is finding your identity inside service, inside serving as an officer. He was a Mustang, finding your identity, your place in the world, especially in these tumultuous interwar years where, history's moving at an exceptionally fast pace in the
Right.
20s and 30s. Find, especially for Julia, where does she fit in? It's just, it's crazy. They move from here and there and everywhere. And it's like, wow. And the other thing that struck me, even as I was writing this for the nth time, is that Arthur, he's gone from being a second lieutenant, and he's not a graduate of a war college or anything like that. He's a Mustang, and he's consistently rising through the ranks, and he's doing all these cool jobs. And what's Julia doing? It's just, I feel sorry for her because he's called to the first big CCCs, in the Depression. He takes 44 horses to the 1932 Olympics. He's playing polo. He's riding. He was on the Army Apollo and U.S. jumping team. He's doing all these cool things, right? And what's Julia doing? Well, she's at home. I don't know what she's doing until she has kids. Um, it just struck me as how, he's very busy doing all these things. His entire career, learning coastal artillery, he's at Command and General Staff School, all these different things. And then Julia. And so I think I'm hoping that people will see that again, this whole identity within the military is really a conundrum.
Is it also an indicator of how few opportunities there were for women back then versus now? And that maybe
Absolutely. I mean,
maybe
but
her life would have been different 100 years later.
100% because we have the internet. She could have done something online. She could have connected with other people, joined a book club. No, there was book clubs and stuff, but it's almost like going from new school to new school every year. Being taken off a reservation, living there for 2 years, going to the next one. You sort of have to start all over again, and that happened, I don't know, 3 or 4 times in the first 15 years of their marriage. And I'm just sure that that was challenging.
Well, you're a writer, you've done film work, and
Mm-hmm.
you're an artist. And
Mm-hmm.
so, and I like a lot of your art. I get like a real, it's real Art Deco almost. I don't know.
Yes, yes.
I do like, it's like, that's what I see, and it's a very like old style that I really like and enjoy. But do you
Thank you.
like one medium or the other? Do you like it all? Or is it just seeing what you can create with what you have?
Well, that's an excellent question. Lately, I've just been sticking to gouache and acrylic, which I'm sure people who are art people know what that is, but just water media. I really I don't enjoy oil that much. It just takes too long to dry and everything. It's not immediate enough for me because I like to do things quickly. Sometimes my best work, I can. My son told me once, he said, "Mom, don't think and do it quick." Okay. And I went downstairs and I did a painting once in 90 minutes. It's one of my best pieces ever. So I try to just not think and just do it, you know.
Just let the brush take you where you
Just
want to
well,
go.
I don't overthink it, you know. That's a big problem with people with writing and painting. And luckily with practice with writing, I don't overthink that either. And you get into a rhythm. And of course, with the novel, I'm following the six landmarks for TV series writing. So that's a huge help with a map, really. I can map out every chapter. It's not so rigorous.
Is how big is the difference between like writing a novel versus writing for film or TV? Because
Yeah,
reading your work in that area, it was almost a different language than what I was
it
used to
is.
seeing for writing in general.
Well, you really picked up on that, Travis. Good for you. Now, in writing for scripts, you have to be in the uber present tense, and your action lines can only be one or two lines long. You have to say it in such compacted language, and because you want as much white space on the page so people can read it, and also producers aren't overwhelmed, and there's a whole bunch of little things. But the fastest it's true. People talk. A guy in Hollywood told me, he said, make it as much white space as you can because people see all these words on the page, they're not going to read it. I'm like, okay. I was like, okay, fine, fine. Anyway, so
Wait. Stop a minute.
yeah,
You have that attitude now, but Shakespeare, you read Shakespeare and there's no white space. In fact, he got every line in the page out if he could. What's
I know.
going on?
People have a low tolerance these days. I don't know.
Okay.
People have lost their tolerance for things. Anyway, to your point, though, very simple, direct, uber present tense for script writing. And then in the novel, thank goodness, I can be more poetic and I like describing things. So I like to describe things. So I can describe things a little more poetically and I don't have to be so uh, you know, chintzy with my words. However, I still covered 20 years in that novel. So I had to write very uh what's the word I'm looking for?
I got
Very conservative.
concise. I would use
Concise
concise.
and conservative.
Yes.
Yes. Economy of words, economy of words. So to cover that kind of space, you can't be verbose. So I covered 20 years in 305 pages. So that's pretty good.
Yeah, but reading the book, I'm
Mhm.
like, you're taking me to the feeling. Like
Thank you.
I really felt like, and I'm not a woman, but
Yeah.
reading, when we're talking about your grandmother, it's like, wait a
Hmm.
minute, I'm feeling what this person is
Wow.
feeling,
Well,
and I thought that was
that's
very key.
well, Travis, that's a very high compliment. Thank you.
Well,
How far did you get? So I know we're you don't have no spoilers, but how far did you get? Like
I'm like to
chapter
chapter
eight, nine,
four.
10?
I'm up to chapter
Oh, four.
four.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you haven't gotten to her yet, but yes, I appreciate you saying that you're at least you feel like you're in the story. Yeah.
I was, taken back to a time where there's no, in some places, no running water, no electricity, no nothing. Very different time in our country. No interstates either. People don't understand that. So
No.
how do you make that relatable to someone who's never seen that kind of America before? I thought it was extremely interesting approach. Um,
Hmm.
when does book two come out, or do you have it done and it's just you're staging these releases as you wish? When's book two?
Luckily, I've written this portion. The next, like I said, it was in a depublished novel, so I'm overwriting it right now. So I'm through chapter one. I'm really trying to get it out by Christmas. Let's see if I can do that. Um, it has less chapters, and it's only 4 years. So I'm hoping I can pull that off. And it's called In the Shade of the Sun.
The long
I
blue.
know that doesn't make sense purposely.
So shadows kind of like in the beginning or end of the day, but in the sun, it's like the sun's out and shining, and I
There's
can't
no shade. Well,
right.
yeah, well, the reason I say it that way is because she's in the hot seat on one side and he's completely in the hot seat in another with no relief on either side.
So this is really gets personal. Okay. Well, how can people connect with you, Heather, get to know your work, get to know what you're up to,
Mhm.
and really, remember, because you don't, this is just one series you have out. Like we talked about this,
Yeah.
you have multiple books out already, and I
Mhm.
want to talk about each and every one of them. But how do people connect with you?
Sure. Well, I mean, right now, like you said, the Kindle is out for the Long Blue Shadow. The paperback comes out June 14th. They can find me on Amazon, of course, Kindle, my website. You can probably find, think I'm on Goodreads. I can't get in there right now, but other people can. Um, LinkedIn, of course. Yeah, those are the big ones.
Well,
Instagram.
well, I will have all those links in the Oscar Mike Radio show post
Hmm.
for our
Hmm.
conversation. Look, folks, you can get the book on Amazon right now and Kindle, which is
Hmm.
kind of like my jam, and I'm enjoying it
Good.
already.
Yeah.
But I think, the question always is, well, Travis, you're not, Heather didn't serve in the military. She's not a veteran. She's not
Yeah.
active duty. Why are you talking with her? And I'm like, well, we need to have these stories told. I think about World War One, how many stories didn't get told, and how much history we actually missed out on. So I really appreciate the fact that you took this upon yourself to do this
Well, thank
and
you.
let us into your family.
Thank you. Also, one of my TV series is about Henry Shreve. It's called The Riverman. So it follows the same kind of tone as John Adams. So everyone, if it's ever sold, will learn about Henry Shreve and everything he did for the United States, opening
Captain
up the
Shreve,
riverways. What?
Captain Shreve.
Captain Shreve, and he, served in the War of 1812, and then, I've got at least four Revolutionary War um, ancestors. Two of them are direct, and then Civil War of many, many. Thomas Jefferson Shreve, my great great grandfather, and then it goes on from there, and then Arthur in World War One and through the Korean War. So there it is.
Kind of winding this down, Heather.
Yeah.
What's been the reaction from your family as they discover, this lineage of service to our country and what that meant?
Hmm. Well, sadly, I don't have much family alive. It's the truth. My two kids and um, some first cousins, which they're a little bit disengaged, but they will eventually. If the movie comes out, they'll see the full thing. Um, there's really nobody left, honestly.
So I'm not cool to my children. I will never be cool. But do they at least think that, mom did a cool thing?
Oh yes, they're
Okay,
huge fans. Yeah, huge
excellent.
fans. They share my stuff on social media, and
That's the
in
best.
even as Lee as a child when he was a kid, even with my earlier books, if they let him choose a book to read and then do a report on, he'd pick my books.
Did he get A's on those?
I don't remember. I don't
Well,
remember. But no, at least they made an attempt. And it's funny because recently both my kids have become extremely avid readers, which they were not 4 years ago or 5 years ago. So, which is great.
I hope it's making a comeback. I went to the library the other day, and
Yeah.
it was really amazing to see all the people there.
Yeah.
Heather, again, I started digging into the book, and I read a lot of them, military stories, but I'm like, wow, you just don't see this. I can't remember anybody I've ever ran into who had family going back that far. In the Northeast, there's some people who can trace their history back to the Revolutionary War, but it's once or twice removed.
Mhm.
And telling the story the way you did, I felt like I was there. And I think that's what I would tell
That's
you.
great.
And it was kind of like this. Hey, women came from. This is how it was for women 100 years ago. This is how it was for these women who were in this place in our country's history. But also, there was no duty officer. There was no Facebook group. There was none of that. at all. And I can't imagine what it's like sitting there day after day wondering what's going on
Well,
with no word.
as you get deeper into the book, you're going to see this whole pillar to post thing start to wear on her. And of course, book 2, you're going to see, she'll be all alone. That's the real thing. I want to amplify the voice for the mill spouse, because I just don't think that, like you said, I don't know that people really give it a second thought most days.
Well, not until there's unfortunately a gold star moment, but a lot of it's just
Exactly.
or in the vernacular, a lot of us, it's a dependa. It's just
Hmm.
they're along for the ride and who cares? But there's a cost for those people while their spouse is served that's not talked about. Absolutely.
Absolutely. There's a lot going on there.
Well, Heather, I want to thank you for one being
Sure.
Semper Gumby, folks. She was with grace and dignity, allowed me to
Thank you.
to pull a couple fast ones on her. But she held it with grace. I want to thank you for your
Oh,
time, and I'm going to
thank you.
appreciate reading the rest of your books. So I
Can't
appreciate you
wait.
coming on the show.
Well, thank you so much, Travis. Thanks for having me.
Well, there you have it, folks. Again, I love telling these stories that aren't the typical military story or the military experience. And Heather certainly has done that with book 1 of this Along Blue Shadows series. Heather, I'll have all the links in Oscar Mike Radio show posts. I want to thank you for coming on. And as we say in Oscar
Great.
Mike Radio, we're mission in flight.
The biggest fear Gold Star families have, that their child will be forgotten.
We need to never forget freedom wasn't free.
It's the fact that they give us the life we have now. We should remember them and give thanks to them.
If I can be a part of something today that's going to make the surviving family of any of these veterans, these heroes, feel better tomorrow, then it's worth it.
That one wreath symbolizes one family that was able to smile because of the generous donations.
To sponsor a wreath and honor a veteran, visit wreathsacrossamerica.org.
Thank you for listening and watching Oscar Mike Radio, where our active duty service members and veterans are in action and the mission is in flight. Oscar Mike Radio is an oversized load Co-Sinister One production. If you are a veteran or know a veteran who needs help, please dial 988 and press 1 for the Veterans Crisis Line.